On today's Celebrity Brides Unveiled, Hollywood legend Mamie Van Doren on her 5 husbands and star-studded celebrity affairs.
And Nixon invited me back to the White House, and then I met Henry Kissinger and dated him. So that's another story. You know, it's the same routine. I mean, it gets very boring hearing the same thing. Henry knows what went on, you know.
From high in the hills, the city below looks like any other sprawling metropolis. Yet this one is different. Its fame has spread to the 4 corners of the earth. Its name is known to practically every man, woman, and child in the universe. For this is fabulous Hollywood.
1950s Hollywood, and the blonde bombshells the press nicknamed the 3 M's: Marilyn Monroe, Jane Mansfield, and Mamie Van Doren. The star of films Ain't Misbehaving, High School Confidential, and Untamed Youth, meet Mamie Van Doren, the living legend, as she recalls her 5 husbands and a string of celebrity liaisons.
When I was a little girl, I must have fallen in love all the time. The minute I started kindergarten, I always had crushes on the other little boys. And from then on, it's just history. I never even realized I was sexy. I thought everybody was like I was. You know, when you're little and young, you just don't even think about, you know, sex. I didn't know what the word meant, you know, and so in those days, you didn't talk about it. You just were yourself, and I was lucky. I was, you know, God was very good to me as far as my attributes were concerned. I never really realized it up to this day that I'm sexy. I really never did. I knew I was different because girls didn't really care for me too much. In school, I had a hard time. I didn't have any girlfriends. No girlfriends, just boyfriends. And it was hard to walk around in the halls sometimes, you know, especially when I got in junior high, it started getting really bad. I got my break really in the late 40s when Howard Hughes saw me in Palm Springs. I was in a beauty contest, and I won the Miss Palm Springs pageant. And he happened to be in the audience, which I didn't know at the time. And then I got a call from RKO Studio, which he owned at the time, and that Howard Hughes wanted to meet me. And now I was just turned 16 then. And my mother says, Howard Hughes, he's got a terrible reputation. And I says, yeah, but he owns a studio, Mom, you know, come on. And then he put me in 4 or 5 movies, got me my SAG contract. And I worked with Jane Russell and Bob Mitchum in my first movie called His Kind of Woman. Well, from then on, I just, you know, I learned the ropes of being in movies, and then I stopped high school. I quit it in 11th grade. I just stopped. I hated it. So, and I wasn't learning anything, except guys just constantly, you know, trying. And so that really, you know, I didn't like that. So at least at the studio, I was making money, legitimately. And I was able to, you know, get the things I wanted without, you know, doing anything for it. And in those days, the only thing you could be is a secretary, a nurse, a teacher, and a wife, or a professional wife, you know. And I thought, well, a professional wife isn't too bad, you know. A trophy wife, or whatever you want to call them. There's so many of those now. But I always wanted to make my own way, and that's exactly what I did. I didn't sleep my way into you know, getting my parts, because you know how the parts I got, they weren't the ones that I slept for.
Wake up. Wake up, Marama. Our sisters are calling. It's time to go into the sea.
Well, Howard Hughes was probably in his 40s, and I was like 16. When I met him, it was kind of a strange relationship. He's demanding. He had to do everything exactly the way he wanted it, on time, be here, because if you're not, I won't see you again. You know, that's just the way he was. And he asked me if I was a virgin the first time I met him. And I told him, you'll never know, Howard, you know. And I don't think he liked that, but anyway. Husband number 1, I got married when I was 17. I married Jack Newman. He was a shirt manufacturer. He had money, he had a big Cadillac, and he had all that flash. And so I liked that, and he was hot. And so I started dating him, and he said, would you marry me? And I said, wow, I never even thought of that. And I said, I don't know. I didn't know whether I wanted to, because I hadn't gone to bed with him. And I said, I don't know. So I talked to my mom and dad, and he says, well, if you want to marry him, that's okay. So we went up to Santa Barbara, California, got married at the City Hall. And I wore my mother's dress because it was blue, and she said, "Marry in blue, you'll always be true," you know, all those. "Marry in brown, you'll live out of town," and all that. And so I got married in blue, and but he wasn't always true. I was true, but he wasn't true. So he was so jealous of me. He bought me a lot of nice clothes, and then when I would really dress up and look sexy, he couldn't stand it because other men looked at me. So when he took my favorite hat and he shredded it, I said, "That's it." So I left. And I was married 6 months. Husband number 2 was Ray Anthony. I have my son by Ray. Ray Anthony was a band leader, and he was played with Glenn Miller's band, and he was a trumpet player, and he had the Ray Anthony Orchestra, and he would play at the Palladium, and he was like the hot ticket then. I mean, everybody loved Ray Anthony. He was $1 million band leader, you know. So I had my contract at the studio at that time. Well, you didn't get married, you didn't have children, you didn't do any of those things. Well, I got pregnant, you know. We were dating, and he divorced his wife, and I thought they were separated when we were going. He told me that, but he really wasn't. And then they went to Mexico and got a divorce. Came back and wanted to marry me, and I didn't want to get married after that. I said, "No, I don't want to marry." I says, "I just don't want to marry now." Well, then I got pregnant, and so then we had to get married. He adored me, and then we lived together for 6 years. That was husband number 2. Divorced in 1961. Then I started dating Bo Belinsky. He was an Angel, a pitcher, a left-handed pitcher, and he had a great screwball. He really liked me, so we got along really well. And then he asked me to marry him, and we became engaged. I said, "Sure, I'll marry you." I hadn't married a ball player before. So it was a hectic relationship. We did everything we would if we were married, and it didn't work out. Then he had introduced me to a ball player named Lee Myers. We met, and boom, he was crazy. He liked me right away. He liked me. When I met him, he was 18 or 19. Okay, so then I called my attorney, and I says, "Look, I'm dating somebody 19, and he wants to get married." Now, before that, you know, I didn't tell you why I married him. I was married because I was pregnant by Joe Namath. Now, oh my God. And I went out with him to make Bo jealous, and I got pregnant by him. So I didn't know what to do, so I got married to Lee. And Lee thought it was his. So, I mean, it was just really, so what I did is I had an abortion. I did not want, you know, I just wasn't going to go through this. So Lee and I were married for about 2.5 years, and we got along really well. He was about the only one I really got along with. And then he cheated on me, and I knew he was cheating, but at that time it seemed like I just didn't care. Well, if he wants to do that, okay, he can come back, but I'm not going to go to bed with him anymore. So I told him, I says, I'm not going to bed. I says, "I think I know who I know you're doing it with somebody else." And he looks at me like, "How would you know?" I said, "The nose knows, you know." I just know when somebody's cheating on me. So then I said, you know, I went out. So I filed for divorce, and he was really upset. Then I was out looking. Then I was really looking. I says, I want to find somebody really that I'm really going to spend the rest of my life with. At that time, I was very depressed because Jane Mansfield had died. She got killed taking a job for me in Biloxi, Mississippi. And I always had a guilt feeling. And so my agent called me and says, "Why don't you go to Florida?" I says, "Yeah, on a vacation, you know." He says, "No, do a play." I met Thomas Dixon, who's my husband now. We lived together 5 years. I said I wasn't getting married. And one morning I woke up and I said, "Let's get married." And so we did. We went down to Santa, the courthouse, and my mom and dad came down and they stood up for us and we got married. We've been together 34 years now. And I've never cheated on him. Came close a couple times, but never did it. I really wanted to, but there's too many chances. Herpes and all that, no way, I'm not going to get that stuff. So I told him, I said, "You don't have to worry. I'm not going to tell you who it was with because he's a popular basketball player." "Okay, I'll tell you who it was. It was Kareem. tall, 7-foot, good-looking, gorgeous guy, and I was his favorite in the 60s, you know. So, but never did it. Oh, you know what? You forgot another husband. I forgot another husband. I'm sorry.
Still to come on Celebrity Brides Unveiled. Mamie Van Doren remembers the husband she forgot and talks about her night with Hollywood hunk Burt Reynolds.
Burt Reynolds, you know, he was in Cosmopolitan with his, you know, a hat over it. And I says, I got to see what's behind that hat.
Return to iconic Hollywood star Mamie Van Doren and her string of high-profile celebrity encounters. But first, the husband she forgot.
My fourth husband was Ross McClintock. He was the vice president of Fluor Oil Corporation. I met him at a Republican convention for Richard Nixon. And then Nixon invited me back to the White House, and then I met Henry Kissinger and dated him. So that's another story. You know, it's the same routine. I mean, it gets very boring hearing the same thing. Well, Henry knows what went on, you know. Now I felt like the trophy wife. He was a young guy. He was in his early 40s. And he offered me everything I wanted. But I just was not happy. So we had it annulled. Best thing. And I was with him probably 6 months, 5 months. And I said, I'm just not meant to be married. My first instinct as far as liking a guy when I see him is it's like undescribable. If I look at a guy, he may not be the greatest looking guy. He may have a big nose and big ears and maybe he's a little too hairy or whatever, but if there's something there, and I just don't know what it is, it's something that radiates inside. Unexplainable. Well, I met Clark Gable the first time out. Well, I first saw him was in South Dakota pheasant hunting. I was 5 years old, and he was leaving the airport in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and they were pheasant hunting with Carol Lombard. That was the first time I saw him. And I told him when I first saw him, when I was sitting with him doing a scene with him and in Teacher's Pet. He says, oh yeah, and then he said that I remind him a little bit of Carol. So that was very nice. He and I hit it off really well. He liked martinis. He was married to Kay at that time. And, but he had eyes, and I would go into his dressing room. He had it in the back, kind of, you know, and he had martinis, and so I came in and had a martini with him, and I sat on his lap. And he said, he invited me in there, and he said, I want you to come in and see your pictures. And I said, pictures? And I said, yeah. So I went in there. He had these pictures of me in his dressing room. And I'm going, wow, Clark Gable's got pictures of me? And so we had pictures taken together, and Edith Head, who did designing, very famous fashion designer in the studios in those days, she had me all in white, like Jean Harlow. Everything I had was in white. And I remember I sat on his lap, but he was very shy. Gable was very shy, and he had a mustache, and it always got in the way. I've kissed him, but I never went to bed with him. That's as far as I got. His wife was always there. Steve McQueen, he'd come up, and then I didn't want him to spend the night with me in bed because I had my son there and everything. So he would go out in the car, and I said, don't drive home. You better, I says, I'm okay, I'll drive home. So I get up in the morning, and he's still sleeping in his car out in the thing. And I said, oh, God, why is he doing that? I should have let him sleep at least in the living room. But I wouldn't let him sleep now. Well, I think about it now, poor Steve, you know, he's sitting in his car sleeping. But he'd come up and he'd give me daisies and he'd drink beer out of the refrigerator, and we carried on for a while. And then I think his wife got a wind of it. I never really thought about myself as being a mistress, not in the sense of the word, you know, like you're kept mistress, and you know, the other woman. I would never want to be the wife. I would always want to be the mistress. And when I talk to women that are being kept, they said, oh, it's terrible. You don't know when he's going to see you. And I says, well, find somebody else in the meantime, you know? Why would you have to sit around and wait for him? Warren Beatty was, I met when, at a party, the party was given by Pamela Mason, James Mason's wife. And it was a big party, Hollywood party, and he was with Joan Collins, and they were dating. He said, give me your phone number, give me your phone number. I said, well, you're with Joan. He says, give me your phone number. So I wrote it down and gave it to him. I was with a guy, you know. So I got home, the phone rings. And it's Warren Beatty. And I said, what are you doing? Aren't you with Joan? No, I dropped her off. I says, well, what did you do that for? And he says, because I want to see you. And I said, well, it's late. And he says, what are you doing? I says, let me just drive by where you are. And so I gave him my address. And I lived up on the Rising Glen Road right off of Sunset Plaza Drive in Hollywood. I had a lovely home. And he came in, and I wouldn't let him go in the house. I said, I'll meet you outside. And he says, let's just drive around. He says he had a convertible, an old convertible then. It was an old Ford convertible, I think. And so we were driving around because they were just making homes around there. And so we drove around, and we stepped and just talked for a while, you know. And he was just so wanting to go to bed, so bad. And when somebody's that way, I just back off. So there was a time when we were tossed on the bed, and I was trying to get up and leave, and he just wouldn't leave me alone. I mean, it was that. Well, I did see it. I can see why Joan liked him, you know. Rock Hudson was under contract with me at Universal Studio, and we worked together in scenes, and we got to know each other. And when I first got there, I wasn't there but 2 or 3 weeks. The studio called and asked me if I would date him to the Golden Globe Awards. You know, I had heard that he was, you know, liked boys, and that I would be as safe as in my mother's arms. So I had no idea that he would, you know, come on. But he's just like anybody else. He came on and was a good kisser, and he, you know, his name should have been Boulder. It's another one. We're going into those again, but you know, that's about the size of it, shall I say. We ended up on the kitchen floor, on the linoleum floor. All my beads came off. My mother came in that next morning. She says, what the hell was going on last night? And she says, well, why? And she says, well, you forgot to unplug the coffee pot, and I nearly fell on my face with all the beads all over the floor. I guess all my beads came off of the dress. Burt Reynolds was doing a movie in New York with Diane Cannon, and he wanted me to come over and see him shoot this particular scene where he does his own stunts. He had run through a glass door and lands on the other side. Well, I had just gotten back from Vietnam, and I saw people get, you know, it was like I saw war up close. And that to me was just a pittance to what, you know, what I had just seen. So he had the limo pick me up, and I went over there. They were shooting in Brooklyn. So I went over there and watched him do this big deal, and everybody, yeah, and I going, no, I didn't want to pretend like that, but it was boring. And so he's full of himself, you know. I knew right away he was full of himself. And he was dating Dinah Shore at the time, an older lady, you know, which was cool for me. I didn't matter to me who he was dating. So he said, let's go out afterwards. So we went to a hot place to eat. And we're sitting at the bar, and he orders a bottle of champagne, and he's getting really sexy, and he's doing this whole thing, and he's going, you know, really, the Burt Reynolds thing, you know, and I'm going, oh, you know, I know he's got a toupee on. That turns me off. I'd rather have him bald, you know. And he says, you know, they've called me the male Mamie Van Doren. And I'm going, I've never heard of a man say that to me, that they're the male Mamie Van Doren. That was the strangest thing I'd ever heard. He's always kind of like bragging how great he is in bed, you know, and he's talking about saying, oh man, this is going to be the start of something big. Burt Reynolds, you know, he was in Cosmopolitan with his, you know, a hat over it. And I says, I got to see what's behind that hat. So, much to my surprise, I said a Tipperillo would have covered it nicely. It was a big letdown, may I tell you. But then when he climaxed, when we were in bed, he climaxed and he hollered, Judy! And I'm going, he was just married to Judy Carney, and he's calling me by his ex-wife's name. I wanted to take his toupee and grab it off and put it down the toilet, but I didn't. Oh, God.
Now, back to the success story of current husband number 5.
Our relationship has lasted because we're both alike. He's a sense of humor like I have. He likes to talk dirty. He likes to do things that he likes the same food. He likes to do everything I like to do, and he isn't doing it just because he's to please me. He just likes to do everything, and he has a great sense of humor. He tells funny jokes, keeps me laughing, and I make him laugh all the time. I get naked at night just before I get in the bathtub, and I just do all these funny things, and he just laughs his ass off when he's watching a ball game or something. And I'll jump on the bed, and I'll be naked, and I'll do all these crazy things. He says, oh, Mamie, I'll never find another one like you. He says, you're just too much. He just gets it. We have so much fun together. We're just like a couple of kids together. We romp, and we have fun. We like to, you know, I'll never ever find another guy to replace me. I hope he doesn't. Nothing happens to my husband and my son. I'm just so lucky I got both of them. Thomas, my husband at this moment, and for the rest of my life, is not jealous at all. He's just the opposite from all the other husbands, and that's one of the reasons why we've gotten along. If he's jealous, he keeps it inside, and he doesn't let it out. But when he's quiet, I know he's thinking. But he doesn't say anything because he knows he married a woman that wants to do whatever she wants to do, and whatever he says, it's not going to work. So he keeps his mouth shut. He's really smart that way. And I'm jealous of him sometimes. If a girl pays attention to him, I get jealous. And I'll take and squeeze his balls, and he won't do it anymore.
Next time on Celebrity Brides Unveiled, former Bond girl and Carry On star Valerie Leon on how she found love when she least expected it.
It was not the most obvious of partnerships. I was a lot younger than him, but he was marvellous in many, many ways.
Plus a wag's tale from the Cundys, ex-Chelsea player Jason and his wife Lizzie.
I arrived at the church and looked down the aisle and I thought, my God, I'm marrying Liberace. Seriously.